Good afternoon. Today my colleagues Eyder, Sima, Lozano, Jesús, Eduardo, Fong, Flores, and I will present identity and transnationalism issues in Retorno students in a Mexican state university on the border region with the U.S. Migration has been part of Mexico and the United States for some time. In this presentation, we aim to describe the experiences of Retorno students in the BA program of language teaching and translation in a Mexican state university on the border with the U.S. They lived in the United States a certain period of time and have returned to Mexico to attend university. We include the voices of these participants to gain insight into their perceptions of their identities and the changes they witness regarding language teaching. Drawing on semi-structured interviews and questionnaires, data reveals how these students feel about their identities from a cultural, social, personal, and linguistic stance, as well as how these two educational contexts relate and other transnationalism. The layout of the presentation is as follows. We will give a brief introduction. The theoretical framework will be presented, as well as the context of the study, the methodology, the results and discussion of the findings, and finally, the conclusions. The objective of the present work is to present the voices of these 9 Retorno participants to gain insight into their perceptions of their identities and the changes they witness regarding their language learning at this state university in Ensenada, Baja California. Migration has long been part of the history of Mexico and the United States for some time now. For these Mexicans who had the opportunity to migrate to the United States to pursue the American dream, and others who have the privilege to go back and forth from one country to the other for diverse reasons, navigating two educational, economic, political, and legal systems simultaneously. This dual navigation is sometimes a difficult one, as noted by Rao and Stasio. Many of those individuals spent their formative years in the United States and experienced distinct challenges upon their return to Mexico, including extreme culture shock, depression, and mental illness, and barriers to accessing employment and education in Mexico. Transnationalism is used to characterize the dense social networks that go beyond the national borders created by the physical, emotional, and economic movement of the individuals and families between countries and cultures. These are some of the key theoretical concepts of our study. Retorno students in this sense can be described as a person who returns to his/her country of origin in order to stay permanently after living in another country for an extended period of time, and this return can be either voluntary or induced. Identity is understood as a spatial and social configuration that people have of themselves based on their territory of origin and the new scenarios they arrive as a result of their migratory trajectory. Now, the nature of transnationalism involves the different sorts of relations, familiar, economic, social, religious, and political, that people create that go beyond physical and political borders. In this sense, situated identity as defined by B is one that encompasses national and family practices with emphasis on the new space. In other words, what the individual performs in the new space based on their knowledge and traditions of their place of origin. Baja California, in this sense, is a multilingual space where not only Spanish and English come together, but indigenous languages as well. These Retorno students come together in this precise university context and are present in our BA programs of language and translation. We will now describe the context where a study took place. The close proximity of Mexico to its northern neighboring country, the United States, leads to an influx and continuous migration between both countries. The Tijuana-San Diego border is considered the largest land border crossing between both countries and the 4th busiest with 70,000 vehicles and 20,000 pedestrians crossing each day. In this sense, the relationship between Baja California and the state of California is in constant movement, as day-to-day interaction is through the English language for diverse purposes such as commercial, academic, and social, as there is an increased population of migration from all over the world. The context of the study and the data collection process was carried out in the Ensenada campus, where mandatory classes, which are first and second semester, the student population presented is 132. We have 92 students in the BA in language teaching, and we have 204 students in the BA in translation. The research questions that guide our study are the following. What are the causes that these Retorno students come back to Mexico? And what are the changes they witnessed regarding their language learning in the university? Our fieldwork was divided into 5 stages. The first stage, the participants of this study identify themselves as Retorno, ones that spent a significant part of their lives of their childhood and youth living and studying in the U.S., but are now enrolled to study their university in Mexico. Snowball sampling was used. Though the responses were limited, we sent a Google questionnaire to the student population to both our BA programs. For example, we asked full name, which program they enrolled in, semester, first and second languages spoken, and years living in the U.S., as well as their migration status. 141 students responded to the questionnaire, but only 17 students responded they have lived in the U.S., that their first language was Spanish and their second language was English. Some responded that they were U.S. citizens. Out of the 17 students, only 9 accepted to participate in the semi-structured interview. It was carried out through Google Meet and lasted approximately 1 hour, and data collection lasted from August to December 2021. The interview was carried out in Spanish to make it easier for the participants to express them, as well as allowing space for following new and relevant information, jointly co-constructed by the individual's experiences. The interviews were translated to English for the purpose of this article and later transcribed to identify emerging themes that will aid in understanding their positions regarding the questions addressed. Some of the 26 questions that were asked, for example, were place of birth, languages spoken, time spent in the U.S., reasons for returning to Mexico, time spent living in Mexico, personal experiences speaking 2 languages, experiences learning Spanish, identity as a speaker in a new linguistic scenario, actions and changes in the new scenario upon arriving, and the use of Spanish, among others. Regarding the second research question, what are the causes that these Retorno students come back to Mexico? Data reveals, for example, in the voice of Martha, she mentions, my father was deported when I was 7 years old. After a few months, my mother decided to return to Mexico because she did not want to be alone. This was when I was younger. I decided to return to Mexico to start university, since where I lived in the United States, I would not receive financial support to go to college. Eyder also added, I came back from the United States to Mexico with my family. The reason why is that university is very expensive and my parents did not want my brother and I to not go to college. For that reason, we moved to Ensenada and we started school here. Vanessa also went on to add, my family decided that I would finish my studies here in Mexico and then work in the United States, since many people do that. But me studying here was partly due to being with my family. The analysis of this first research question is that these students' voices reveal that family is a central and key issue why they decided to become part of this return migration. Central to this are financial and health issues, dislike of living in the US, cost of attending university, and this leads to the main justification that family is very important and constitutes the support they need to navigate a new culture and way of living. Regarding the next research question, what are the changes they witnessed regarding their language learning and identity in the university context? In regards to language learning, Carola mentioned, I have noticed some changes to my Spanish. It has improved both orally and in my writing. Before, my ability to write was not bad. I have simply improved because I used to speak Spanish with my family at home. Now living and studying at the University in Mexico, I am obligated to use Spanish more. Now at university, I have to use both English and Spanish alike, formal and informally. This helped me in practicing and improving both languages. Johanna also added, schools and universities need to promote programs that permit the exploration of two cultures and not discriminate them. Gaia also highlighted, personally, I think that taking a few Spanish courses would have helped me with my Spanish grammar classes to help reinforce my Spanish grammar once I re-entered the university context. Diana concluded to do nothing. The simple fact of trying to help them creates a categorization. She means the students, and they look different from other students as they attend classes, meeting, etc. Special. In this analysis, there are some key facts that arose. The fact that not every school in Mexico handles the needs of Retorno students in the same manner. Teachers just accept them, treat them, and teach them as the rest of their peers, a one-size-all pedagogy. Similarly, many American schools are not prepared to receive Mexican Spanish speakers as students. As a consequence, some students feel alienated, while others become capable of developing abilities to easily shift from one environment. While U.S. bilingual programs may be largely successful in teaching English to immigrant children, these interviews revealed some areas of concern. Spanish in U.S. educational settings function primarily as an entry point, as a learning tool, to help students develop their English language proficiency. Many, if not most, Retorno students run the risk of not being linguistically prepared in the Spanish for re-entry to Mexican schools, especially university. In regards to identity, Cindy mentioned, I think my identity has changed as a speaker, since my Spanish was more formal in comparison to how I speak now, less formal, more relaxed. In regards to English, I do not feel that my identity has changed much as an English speaker. Eyder also highlighted, even though my mother tongue is Spanish, I do use it quite a lot. As a speaker, I identify myself more with English. I identify with it more because it is a language that I learned from a very young age, and I continue to use it. I am in contact with it by watching movies in English, listening to music, interacting with my friends in the United States through the different social networks, etc., as well as the career I chose, language teaching. In regards to the analysis, specifically in terms of identity, we observe that when in the US, they have a combined identity, both Mexican and American, and in many cases, more Mexican. These students' situated identities reveal a vision that it does not matter where their place of birth is, they are still Mexican. They do not deny their relationship with the present in which they interact. These students also make a conscious effort to maintain social, cultural, and linguistic connections with both countries, as revealed in the data analysis. Finally, the conclusions. There were some very strong revelations in this study. First and foremost, we strongly believe that more interaction and cooperation are needed between scholars and teachers in the United States, Mexico, and other Latin American nations. Secondly, we have to seriously embrace the reality that people do move across borders, either voluntarily or not, and that our educational systems may need to educate students for that possibility, specifically from grade school to university. Flattening of language differences and a one-size-fits-all pedagogy. Generally, what this individual awareness of languaging differences means is that most teachers in our program use a one-size-fits-all pedagogical approach, where all students, regardless of their prior English language ability or exposure, are taught the same curriculum with little to no deviation. Also, there is still a strong tendency by many Mexican educators to view all students as the same, devoid of any historical and political contextual specificity. As an emerging population, UABC needs to consider these almost invisible students in terms of their communicative and language learning needs, and how both languages are used in both contexts. In broad terms, despite this increase in scholarly output, its conclusions and implications for Mexican university education has yet to have wide influence on daily teaching practice and curriculum matters. Finally, as a field, we need to reframe our loci of attention away from the strict privileging of mononational interests in order to ask new questions, rethink if our current methods and theories fulfill the educational demands of this population, especially those who one day have to return and go back and forth to their nations of origins. And we conclude our presentation with thank you for your attention.